Hello and welcome back to this final part of Restoration literature. Today we'll be talking about Aphra Behn. Very little is known about Aphra Behn other than she must have been born in the 1640s. Nothing is known about her family, and what is known is generally very controversial. Some scholars believe that Aphra Behn joined the Johnson family on their trip to Suriname in 1663. Whether she was part of the Johnson family or a foster of theirs is unknown. But for whatever reason, she left England with them. Unfortunately, Mr. Johnson died on the trip to South America, and his wife and children stayed in Suriname only for a few months before returning to England. This story is popular because it explains Aphra Behn's knowledge of slavery, which she writes about in her 1688 novel Orinoco. After this voyage, Behn once again disappears, and at some point in the next decade she must have married a man with the last name Behn. It is supposed that he was a Dutch merchant. What happened to Mr. Behn is unknown, but it can be assumed that he died because Behn was left to fend for herself. One thing is known, and it's that Charles II hired Behn as a spy. One would imagine it would be kind of like being James Bond, drinking fancy martinis and wearing nice suits. But unfortunately for Behn, it seems that Charles II was not interested in paying her very much, if at all, and she was forced to pawn her jewelry just to maintain her position in Europe while she's on her spy mission. When she got back to England, it appears that she didn't get any payment either, because it is likely that she ended up in a debtor's prison. Although Charles was king, he didn't control the main taxes, and it was through taxes that kings gained their wealth. So he often found himself in financial difficulties, and it is for this reason that a lot of his debts went unpaid. And I guess in some ways, why would he pay his debts? He was king, he could do what he wanted. What did it matter to him if a few peasant families went broke because he couldn't pay back his tailor? After this experience, Behn decided that she wanted to be self-sustaining, and she didn't want to rely on anyone else for money, so she took up professional writing. For a few years, she would write plays for the King's Company and the Duke's Company before disappearing off the record for a few years. Whether she went to Europe just for traveling or for more spying is unknown, but when she did return, she started to write more comedic plays, and those are the plays she's most well remembered for. By then, her circle of friends included John Dryden and the Earl of Rochester, which of course left her very well situated. Aphra Behn can be considered the inventor of the modern English novel as we know it today. Her 1688 novel Orinoco is about an African prince who's enslaved and sent to Suriname to work on a plantation. In the story, Orinoco falls in love with the beautiful young Imoinda, but unfortunately for him, the king also falls in love with her, and she is taken as one of his wives. One day, she leaves the harem and meets up with Orinoco, but they are caught, and she is sent off to be a slave. Meanwhile, Orinoco is left free for a bit longer, but he too is soon enslaved. Amazingly, the two end up on the same plantation in Suriname, where Imoinda becomes pregnant with Orinoco's child, and eventually Orinoco leads a slave revolt. Unfortunately, he is captured and whipped as punishment, and in anger, Orinoco swears revenge, because of course he's a prince, he never should have been whipped. He never should have been enslaved for that reason. He's royalty. Black or white, he is royalty. While planning his revenge, it becomes clear to him that once he kills the deputy governor, his wife, Imoinda, will likely be raped. So he decides that it is better that she and the child should die than continue to live on in slavery. Imoinda agrees and lets Orinoco kill her. However, Orinoco is so distraught by this death that he finds himself unable to take revenge, and when he's eventually discovered, he cuts himself very violently, but surprisingly doesn't bleed to death right away, and he has the strength to be taken and tied up to a pole where he will be dismembered. He takes the painful death very well, as even on the point of death he is asking for a pipe to smoke. What surprises modern readers the most about this novel is that neither Behn nor Orinoco condemn slavery. What they do condemn is the enslavement of royal people. Orinoco is a prince, and he should never have been enslaved, as that challenges the natural order. Imoinda, as his princess, should have been free as well. And his child, who should never have been born into slavery, must die, as death is better than enslavement of a royal family member. The story is written in a third-person and first-person narration, which allows the reader to believe that the story is a true account of events. Of course, there's no record of a real Orinoco ever existing, and it is assumed that it is entirely fiction. But as Aphra Behn says in the first paragraph of the novel, Orinoco, Chapter 1. I do not pretend, in giving you the history of this royal slave, to entertain my reader with adventures of a feigned hero, whose life and fortunes fancy may manage at the poet's pleasure, nor in relating the truth design to adorn it with any accidents, but such as arrived in earnest to him, and it shall come simply into the world, recommended by its own proper merits and natural intrigues, there being enough of reality to support it, and to render it diverting, without the addition of invention. I was myself an eyewitness to a great part of what you will find here set down, and what I could not be witness of, I received from the mouth of the chief actor in this history, the hero himself, who gave us the whole transactions of his youth. The focus on Orinoco's slow and calm death is meant to highlight his strengths, and to differentiate him from mere mortals who do not have royal blood. Anyone else would be in incontrollable pain while they are being dismembered, but Orinoco just asks for a pipe. His murder of Emuenda and the child was an act of honor, and his enslavement a massive affront to the natural order. And that is what Behn is trying to illustrate in this novel. Behn was a Tory with Catholic sympathies, and she used her poetry to attack the Whigs who she felt were undermining the position of the king. As you'll remember, the Tories were the supporters of an absolutist monarch, while the Whigs preferred a constitutional monarchy. In the Rochester video, I mentioned Gilbert Burnet, later the Bishop of Salisbury, and because he was a Whig, this placed him in direct opposition with Aphra Behn and her political opinions. In 1689, it appears that Burnet asked Behn about her political muse, and she replied in a published poem entitled A Pindaric Poem, in which she says, My muse that would endeavour fain to glide with the fair prosperous gale and the full driving tide, but loyalty commands with pious force that stops me in the thriving course. The breeze that wafts the crowding nations o'er leaves me unpitied far behind, on the forsaken barren shore, to sigh with echo and the murmuring wind, while all the inviting prospect I survey, with melancholy eyes I view the plains, where all I see is ravishing and gay, and all I hear is mirth in loudest strains. Thus while the chosen seed possess the promised land, I like the excluded prophet stand, the fruitful happy soil can only see, but am forbid, by fate's decree, to share the triumph of the joyful victory. Behn had sided with James II during the Glorious Revolution, and this poem makes it clear that she cannot rejoice in the celebrations of having William and Mary on the throne, because she's the excluded prophet and knows better. Obviously, this lack of support for the new constitutional monarchy made her unpopular at court, and she struggled to make ends meet until her death in 1689. Her circle of Catholic friends and her support of James II did raise eyebrows, but her libertine morals made her unpalatable to later Victorian sensibilities. Aphra Behn is a truly interesting character. Not only is she considered the first professional female English writer, but her mysterious career in espionage and her equally mysterious childhood paint a portrait of a woman who knew how to inspire curiosity, and a woman who was shrewd enough to survive on her own during a period when women were expected to rely on men for support. The Victorians did not like her opinions nor her lifestyle, so they lumped her along with Mad Madge, also known as Margaret Cavendish, Duchess of Newcastle upon Tyne, and she was largely ignored until the 20th century when writers like Virginia Woolf came across her works. Thanks for watching this mini-series on Restoration literature. I've had fun making these videos. I don't know what I'll do next, but maybe some other mini literature course. I don't know. But thank you for watching.